The stars look different from up here, Commander Jake Morrison thought as he stared out the viewport of the stellar dawn. He had seen space before, plenty of times during Earth's early expansion into the solar system. But this was different. This was deep space, real space, the kind where Earth was just a tiny blue dot somewhere far behind them. He adjusted his uniform collar and took a deep breath. Today, humanity would officially join the Galactic Coalition, and he was the one who had to make sure they didn't embarrass themselves. The stellar dawn was massive, bigger than anything humans had ever built. It belonged to the Valorians, a species that looked like walking crystals and had been traveling through space for over 10,000 years. Jake still couldn't wrap his head around that number. 10,000 years. Back on Earth, humans were still figuring out farming when these beings were already jumping between stars. The ship hummed with a sound that didn't quite match anything he knew, something between a song and a machine. And it made him feel very small and very young. Lieutenant Amy Foster walked up beside him, carrying a data tablet that glowed with alien symbols. She was their tactical analyst, the smartest person Jake had ever met, and probably the only human who had actually read through all 3 million pages of Coalition history they'd been sent. Her short brown hair was pulled back tight, and she had that look on her face that meant she'd found something interesting or troubling. Maybe both. "Commander, we need to talk about something before the ceremony," she said quietly, glancing around to make sure no aliens were in earshot. The corridor was empty except for them, just smooth walls that seemed to glow from within. "I've been going through the military archives they gave us access to." Jake turned to face her fully. Amy didn't waste time on small concerns, so if she was bringing something up now, it mattered. "What did you find?" "The Devourers," she said, and her voice dropped even lower. "They're worse than the Coalition told us." Much worse. Jake had heard about the Devourers during the initial contact meetings. They were described as a mechanical threat, some kind of ancient weapon system gone rogue, consuming everything in their path at the galaxy's edge. The Coalition had been fighting them for centuries, keeping them contained, or so they said. "How bad are we talking?" Amy pulled up a holographic display from her tablet. Images floated in the air between them, showing dark masses of shifting metal, worlds stripped bare, fleets of ships reduced to debris. "They adapt, Commander. Every weapon the Coalition uses, the Devourers learn to counter it. Energy weapons, quantum disruptors, gravitational pulses, antimatter bombs, everything. First time a weapon hits them, it works great. Second time, less effective. Third time, almost useless. By the fourth engagement with the same weapon type, it's like shooting water at a wall. So the Coalition just keeps inventing new weapons," Jake said, understanding dawning on him. "Exactly. But here's the problem." Amy zoomed in on a chart that showed weapon effectiveness over time. The line dropped steadily downward. "They're running out of new ideas. The Devourers have been around for at least 3 centuries that we know of. Every weapon type the Coalition has invented in that time, every single one eventually becomes useless. And the adaptation is getting faster." Jake felt a chill run down his spine. "Why didn't they tell us this during first contact?" "Would you want to scare off the new members?" Amy asked. "Besides, I don't think they realize how bad it is. Each species in the Coalition only sees their own piece of the puzzle. I've been cross-referencing reports from different member worlds. When you put it all together, the pattern is clear. The Devourers are learning faster than the Coalition can innovate." Before Jake could respond, Captain Eric Stone came around the corner, his heavy boots echoing in the corridor. Eric commanded the Pathfinder, Earth's first true deep space warship, and he looked like someone had carved him out of granite and decided that was good enough. He was older than both of them, gray at the temples with eyes that had seen combat back during the Mars conflicts. "Commander Morrison, Lieutenant Foster, we've got a situation." "The ceremony?" Jake asked. "Cancelled," Eric said flatly. "Well, postponed. The Devourers just changed course. They're heading toward Coalition space, and they're moving faster than they ever have before. The Council is assembling a defense fleet, and they're requesting all available ships, including ours." Jake's stomach dropped. Humanity had 12 warships total. 12, the Coalition had thousands. If they were asking for Earth's tiny fleet, things must be desperate. "When do we move out?" 4 hours, Eric replied. "We're heading to Kronos Station. It's a defensive platform at the edge of civilized space. Admiral Lisa Grant is already coordinating our ships. We'll be the smallest contingent there, but the Coalition says every vessel counts. Amy looked between them, her face pale. Sir, they don't know about the adaptation acceleration. If we go into this battle using the same tactics they've always used, then we'll probably lose. Eric finished for her. I know, I read your report. But we're going anyway. Earth didn't join the coalition to hide when things got tough. Jake nodded slowly. Eric was right, even if the situation looked grim. Get the word out to all human vessels. Full combat preparation.
Amy, I want you to compile everything you've found about Devourer adaptation patterns and send it to every ship captain we have.
Maybe our people can spot something the coalition missed? Yes, sir, Amy said, already typing on her tablet. Eric crossed his arms. Our weapons are pretty basic compared to coalition tech. We've got railguns, missiles, some plasma cannons we barely understand how to use. Think any of that will make a difference against an enemy that adapts to everything? Honestly, probably not, Jake admitted. But we have to try. Who knows, maybe being primitive will work in our favor somehow. Eric snorted. That's optimistic thinking, Commander. It's all I've got right now. Captain. 4 hours later, the human fleet departed from Vexara Prime, 12 small ships following in the wake of massive coalition dreadnoughts. Jake stood on the bridge of the Pathfinder, watching as they entered jump space. That weird realm between stars where physics got strange and distances became meaningless. Through the viewport, space twisted and bent, colors that shouldn't exist bleeding into each other. He thought about Earth, about the billions of people who were counting on them without even knowing it. Humanity had just stepped onto the galactic stage, and their first real test was against an enemy that had defeated every advanced weapon ever created. They were flying toward a battle with technology the Coalition considered primitive, hoping to make some kind of difference. The jump ended, and normal space reasserted itself. Ahead of them, Kronos Station loomed, a massive structure of metal and energy shields bristling with weapons, and beyond it, barely visible against the darkness of space, was something else. A shadow. A cloud that seemed to swallow light itself. The Devourers had arrived. Amy's voice came over the comm, quiet but steady. Commander, sensor readings are coming in. Estimated enemy count is in the millions. This is going to be the largest battle in Coalition history. Jake took a deep breath and activated the ship-wide channel. His voice would reach every human vessel in the fleet. This is Commander Morrison to all Earth ships. I won't lie to you about what we're facing. The enemy ahead of us has beaten every weapon the galaxy ever made. They adapt, they learn, and they don't stop. But here's what they haven't faced yet. Humans who are too stubborn to know when they're beaten. We came to the stars to prove we belong here. Today we get our chance. All ships, battle stations. Let's show them what Earth is made of. The Pathfinder's engines hummed to life, and around them, 11 other human ships moved into formation. Small, primitive, and completely outmatched, but ready to fight anyway. Because that's what humans did. They faced the impossible and figured it out as they went. The battle was about to begin. The darkness came alive, and that was the only way Jake could describe it as he watched the Devourers approach Kronos Station. What had looked like a distant shadow now resolved into individual shapes. Millions of them, each one a machine the size of a small building. They moved together like a school of fish, flowing and shifting, their surfaces reflecting no light at all. It was like watching a hole in space move toward them with terrible purpose. Admiral Lisa Grant's face appeared on the main screen, transmitted from her flagship, the Washington. She looked calm, but Jake could see the tension in her jaw. Behind her, the bridge crew was frantically working their stations. All human vessels, this is Grant. We're taking position on the Coalition fleet's left flank. Our orders are to provide supporting fire and stay in formation. Do not, I repeat, do not break formation to engage independently. Understood, Admiral, Jake replied, then muted his mic and turned to Eric. She knows we're basically window dressing here, right? Eric was studying the tactical display, where thousands of ship icons surrounded Kronos Station in defensive layers. The human ships were tiny green dots among a sea of blue Coalition vessels. She knows. We all know. But we show up anyway. That counts for something. Amy was at her station, her fingers dancing across controls as she monitored the enemy approach. Commander, I'm reading the Coalition fleet's weapon signatures. They're powering up everything. Plasma cannons, antimatter torpedoes, quantum disruptors, the works. This is going to be the biggest alpha strike in history. The Coalition commander's voice boomed across all channels, translated into dozens of languages simultaneously. It belonged to a Valorian admiral whose name Jake couldn't pronounce. All ships prepare to fire on my mark. We will show these machines that the civilized galaxy does not yield. Target the leading edge of their formation. Fire in 3, 2, 1 mark. Space erupted in light. Thousands of weapons fired at once. A wall of destruction that stretched across millions of kilometers. Plasma bolts streaked toward the devourers like falling stars. Antimatter torpedoes left trails of twisted space in their wake. Quantum disruptors made reality itself shudder. The barrage hit the devourers head-on, and for a moment Jake felt hope. The machines shattered by the thousands, torn apart by forces that could crack planets. But then Amy's voice cut through the chaos, sharp with alarm. "Commander, they're adapting. Look at the energy readings." Jake watched his screen as the second wave of fire reached the devourers. This time fewer machines fell. Their surfaces had changed, rippling like liquid metal, dispersing energy that should have destroyed them. The third wave was even less effective. Plasma bolts that had vaporized the enemy moments ago now barely scorched their hulls. "Impossible," Eric breathed. That was less than 2 minutes. "Not impossible," Amy said, her voice tight. "Exactly what I warned about. They're adapting in real time now. Whatever evolution they needed centuries to accomplish before, they're doing it in minutes." The Coalition fleet fired again, switching to different weapons. Gravitational pulses crushed dozens of devourers, creating tiny black holes that sucked them in. But even as Jake watched, the surviving machines began to resist the pull. Their bodies elongated, spread out, reducing the gravitational effect. By the fifth pulse, they were flying through the distortions like they weren't even there. "All ships, switch to quantum disruptors," the Coalition commander ordered, and Jake could hear the desperation creeping into that translated voice. The quantum weapons were strange, making space itself crack and shatter around the devourers. For a few seconds it worked beautifully. Machines folded in on themselves, their matter states becoming unstable. Then the adaptation happened again. The devourers' surfaces began to shimmer, existing in multiple quantum states simultaneously, immune to the weapons trying to unmake them. Eric slammed his fist on his chair's armrest. "This is insane. How do you fight something that learns faster than you can shoot?" Jake's mind raced. Every weapon failed within minutes. The Coalition was cycling through their entire arsenal, and nothing stuck. Then an idea hit him, probably a stupid one, but they were running out of time. "Amy, what weapons haven't the Coalition used yet?" She looked at him, confused. "Sir, they're using everything. Every weapon type they have." "No, I mean, what weapons do we have that they don't?" Amy blinked, then understanding crossed her face. She pulled up the human fleet's armament list. "Railguns, sir. We still use kinetic weapons, simple metal slugs accelerated by magnets. The Coalition phased those out thousands of years ago, considered them too primitive." Eric caught on immediately. "You think the Devourers haven't seen kinetic weapons because nobody uses them anymore?" "It's a theory," Jake said. "Amy, have the Devourers shown any adaptation to physical impacts?" "Not energy, just solid matter hitting them." Amy's fingers flew across her controls, searching through the battle data. "I don't see any records of it, sir. The Coalition stopped using kinetic weapons so long ago. There's no data on how the Devourers respond to them." Jake opened a channel to Admiral Grant. "Admiral, request permission to engage with railguns." There was a pause, then Grant's face reappeared. Behind her, something exploded, shaking her bridge. "Commander Morrison, railguns are short-range weapons and we're fighting at extended distances. They won't reach the enemy from our current position. Then request permission to break formation and close distance, ma'am." Another pause. Longer this time. Grant looked off screen, probably conferring with her tactical team. When she turned back, her expression was grim. "Permission denied, Commander. I won't risk human ships on an untested theory. We maintain formation and provide support fire with our plasma cannons." Jake wanted to argue, but he understood. Grant was responsible for every human life in the fleet, and charging into the middle of a battle with experimental tactics was a good way to get them all killed. "Understood, Admiral." Morrison out, but Eric wasn't giving up. "Jake, look at the tactical display. The Coalition left flank is collapsing. Those ships are falling back, and there's a gap forming." Jake saw it. A space in the defensive line where Devourer machines were pouring through, heading straight for Kronos Station. If they reached the station, millions of civilians sheltering there would die. If we happened to be repositioning to cover that gap, And if we happen to get close enough to use railguns, well, that would just be doing our job. A slow smile crossed Eric's face. Captain's discretion to respond to tactical situations. I like how you think. Amy, calculate a firing solution for railguns. Eric, take us toward that gap, best speed. The Pathfinder surged forward, breaking from the human formation. Behind them, 2 other human ships followed, the Denver and the Soul, their captains apparently thinking along the same lines. Admiral Grant's voice crackled over the comm, angry. Morrison, what are you doing? I said maintain formation. Respectfully, Admiral, there's a gap in the line threatening Chronos Station. We're moving to intercept. Morrison out. Jake muted the channel before Grant could respond. They accelerated toward the gap, and the Devourer seemed to notice them. A cluster of machines broke off from the main swarm, heading to intercept the 3 small human ships. There were at least 1,000 of them, and Jake's ship had 1 railgun mounted on the forward hull. Range in 30 seconds, Amy called out. Sir, I hope you're right about this. So do I, Lieutenant. So do I. The Devourers closed in, their dark forms filling the viewport. Jake could see details now. The way their surfaces shifted and flowed, covered in patterns that hurt to look at. They were adapting even as they flew, probably preparing for whatever weapons the humans would use. 10 seconds to railgun range. Amy counted down. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, range achieved. Fire, Jake ordered. The Pathfinder shuddered as the railgun fired. A simple iron slug the size of a trash can accelerated to a fraction of light speed. No energy signature, no exotic physics, just mass times velocity. The slug hit the lead Devourer and punched straight through it, then through the one behind it and the one behind that. A single shot creating a hole through 3 machines. For a moment, nobody spoke. Then Eric started laughing, a sound of pure relief. It worked. It actually worked. Keep firing, Jake shouted. Don't give them time to adapt. The railgun fired again and again, each shot destroying Devourers like they were made of paper. The Denver and Soul opened up with their own kinetic weapons, and the cluster of machines started to fall apart. They tried to adapt, their surfaces hardening, but armor only helped so much against solid matter traveling at incredible speeds. Amy was grinning now. Sir, they're trying to strengthen their hulls, but it's making them slower. They can't adapt to basic physics. But Jake's smile faded as he looked at the larger battle. We found something that works, but we're 3 ships out of thousands. We need the whole fleet doing this, or we're just buying time. As if to prove his point, a massive wave of Devourers swept past their position, ignoring the 3 human ships to strike at Chronos Station's shields. The shields flared and failed, and the machines began tearing into the station's hull. They had found the answer, Jake realized, but they had found it too late. The evacuation of Chronos Station happened in chaos, ships scrambling to dock and pull away with as many civilians as they could carry. Jake watched from the Pathfinder's bridge as the massive structure began to break apart under the Devourer assault, pieces of it spinning off into space-trailing atmosphere and debris. The Coalition fleet had pulled back, forming a new defensive line further in-system, but everyone knew it was just delaying the inevitable. 3 days later, Jake found himself back on Vexara Prime, standing in front of the Coalition Council. The council chamber was enormous, a circular room with seating for representatives from over 300 species. The architecture was designed to be neutral, not favoring any particular species aesthetic, which somehow made it feel cold and impersonal. Jake stood in the center, feeling very alone and very human. The Valorian council leader, a being of living crystal named Jathira, addressed him with a voice that sounded like wind chimes. Commander Morrison, your actions at Chronos Station were both brave and reckless. You disobeyed direct orders from your superior officer. Yes, council member, I did, Jake admitted. There was no point in denying it, and yet, your discovery about kinetic weapons has given us something we have not had in decades. Hope. Jathira gestured, and a hologram appeared showing the battle footage. The Devourers have adapted to energy, to quantum manipulation, to gravitational forces. But they cannot easily adapt to simple mass and velocity. This is a significant finding. A council member who looked like a floating jellyfish pulsed with bioluminescent patterns that the translator rendered as speech. However, the finding is practically useless. Kinetic weapons lack the range and power to combat the Devourers in meaningful numbers. We would need to approach to close range, which is suicide given their numbers. Jake had heard this argument before, and he still didn't have a good answer for it. The council members were right. 3 ships with railguns had made a dent, but the Devourers numbered in the millions. Council members, I believe there is a solution, but I need time to develop it. Time is precisely what we do not have, Jathira said. Our projections show the Devourers will reach the industrial world of Theros in 7 days. That world houses 5 billion souls and produces 40% of our military hardware. If it falls, we lose both the population and our ability to manufacture new weapons. Then we have 7 days to figure this out, Jake replied. Amy had been waiting outside the council chamber, and when Jake emerged, she fell into step beside him. How bad was it? They're desperate but skeptical, Jake said. They acknowledge that kinetic weapons work, but they don't see how to use them effectively on a large scale. I might have an idea about that, Amy said, pulling up her ever-present tablet. I've been talking with some coalition scientists, the ones who are actually willing to listen to the primitive humans. We've been running simulations. They entered a small conference room where several aliens were already gathered around a holographic display. Jake recognized a few. Dr. Keln, a Valorian scientist who seemed less arrogant than most of his species, and Commander Vera, a military strategist from a species that looked like upright mantises. Commander Morrison, Dr. Keln greeted him, his crystalline body chiming softly. Lieutenant Foster has presented us with an intriguing theory. Please observe. The hologram showed a simulation of the Devourers, then objects being thrown at them. Not sophisticated missiles or energy blasts, just rocks and chunks of metal. What am I looking at? The fundamental problem, Vera clicked, her mandibles moving as she spoke. The Devourers adapt to complexity. Energy weapons have signatures, quantum weapons have exotic properties, all things that can be analyzed and countered. But kinetic weapons are irreducibly simple. They are mass moving through space. There is nothing to adapt to except the basic laws of physics. Amy zoomed in on the simulation. We tested Devourer fragments in the lab, the ones we recovered from the battle. Hit them with energy, they adapt. Hit them with exotic matter, they adapt. Hit them with a rock going fast enough, they shatter. They try to make their armor thicker, but that only works up to a point. Add too much mass for armor and they can't maneuver. The laws of physics become their limitation. Jake started to see where this was going, so we need more kinetic weapons, a lot more. Not just weapons, Dr. Keln said. We need to change our entire approach to warfare. The Coalition has spent thousands of years making weapons more sophisticated, more complex, more powerful. We need to go backward. Backwards how? Jake asked. Commander Vera brought up new images showing ships being modified. We strip out energy weapons and replace them with mass drivers. Simple magnetic accelerators that can throw anything with mass. Rocks, metal fragments, ice chunks, anything. We turn the battlefield itself into ammunition. The Council will never approve this, Jake said. They're proud of their advanced technology. The Council is terrified, Vera corrected. Fear makes people reconsider their pride. We have already begun quiet conversations with fleet commanders. Many are willing to try, especially those who lost ships at Chronos Station. Amy pulled up a star map. Theros is here 7 days away. The Devourers are approaching from this vector. If we can get enough ships retrofitted with kinetic weapons and position them along the approach route, we can create a gauntlet. Force the Devourers to fly through a storm of rocks and metal. How many ships would we need? Jake asked. Conservative estimate? About 500 vessels fully converted to kinetic armaments, plus support craft to deliver ammunition, Dr. Keln said. The Coalition has thousands of ships, but converting them in 7 days will be challenging. Jake thought about it. The plan was insane, asking the most advanced military in the galaxy to fight with rocks and metal chunks. But it was also the only plan that had any chance of working. What do you need from me? Credibility, Vera said simply. You are human, from a species that still uses primitive weapons regularly. The Council respects your success at Chronos Station, even if they did not say so publicly. If you present this plan and endorse it, more commanders will listen. I'm just a commander, not an admiral or a council member. You are the person who discovered that the answer to our most advanced enemy is our most primitive weapons, Amy said. That means something. Jake looked at the simulation again, watching rocks destroy Devourers that had shrugged off quantum disruptors. It shouldn't work. It was almost offensive to the idea of progress and advancement that it worked. But it did. All right, I'm in. What's the first step? Over the next 3 days, Jake barely slept. He met with fleet commanders, demonstrated the kinetic weapon effectiveness to skeptical officers, and helped coordinate the retrofit operations. Admiral Grant arrived from Earth with authorization to commit all human resources to the effort, and she threw herself into the planning with the same intensity she brought to everything. Captain Eric Stone led the practical implementation, working with coalition engineers to design simple but effective mass driver systems. They didn't need to be elegant or sophisticated, just functional. Magnetic coils, a power source, and a launch tube. Some of the coalition engineers were horrified at the crude designs, but Eric kept reminding them that crude was the point. The biggest challenge was ammunition. They needed mass, lots of it, and they needed it fast. The solution came from an unexpected source: asteroid mining operations. The coalition had been mining asteroids for resources for millennia, and those operations had access to millions of tons of raw material. Within 2 days, mining ships were redirected to gather not refined metals, but raw rocks, ice, and debris. Jake stood in a cargo bay on Vixara Prime, watching as containers of rocks were loaded onto coalition warships. Next to him, a Valorian officer watched with barely concealed disgust. "This is what we have become? Stone throwers? If stone throwing saves Theros, then yes, that's what we've become," Jake replied. By day 5, they had 400 ships retrofitted with kinetic weapons. Not as many as they wanted, but it would have to be enough. The fleet began moving toward Theros, taking positions along the Devourer's projected approach route. Each ship carried thousands of tons of ammunition: asteroids, metal fragments, ice comets, even debris from destroyed stations. Amy had developed a firing pattern that would maximize coverage. Ships would be staggered in layers, creating a 3-dimensional grid of fire. The Devourers would have to fly through multiple waves of kinetic bombardment, with no gaps to exploit. In theory, it would work. In theory. Jake was aboard the Pathfinder again, positioned at the front of the formation. Through the viewport, he could see dozens of other ships, all bristling with mass drivers instead of their usual energy weapons. It looked wrong, like they had regressed thousands of years in technology, but maybe that was exactly what they needed. "All ships, this is Admiral Grant," the COMM crackled. "Devourer fleet detected, right on schedule. They will be in range in 4 hours. All crews to battle stations. Today we defend Theros, and we do it with the oldest weapons known to civilization. We throw rocks, and we throw them hard. Grant out." Eric settled into the captain's chair. "You know, when I joined the fleet, I thought I'd be fighting with lasers and missiles. Never imagined I'd be throwing asteroids at hostile machines." Space became solid with flying rock and metal. 400 ships opened fire simultaneously, their mass drivers hurling asteroids, boulders, iron fragments, and ice chunks at velocities that turned them into devastating projectiles. The sight was almost beautiful in its violence. Streams of matter crisscrossing space like a deadly meteor shower, all converging on the Devourer formation. The first wave hit, and Devourers shattered by the thousands. Metal bodies designed to absorb energy and disperse exotic forces simply couldn't handle the basic physics of mass times velocity. A refrigerator-sized rock moving at a fraction of light speed punched through them like they were made of glass. The machines tried to scatter, to spread their formation, but there was nowhere to go. The coalition ships had created a gauntlet, a tunnel of kinetic fire that the Devourers had to fly through to reach Theros. Amy was coordinating targeting from her station, her voice rapid fire as she called out adjustments. "Sector 4, increase fire density. Sector 7, good coverage, maintain rate. They're trying to concentrate on the lower flank. Redirect 30% of fire to coordinates transmitted now." Jake watched the tactical display, seeing the Devourer formation start to deform under the bombardment. They were adapting, he could see it happening. Their hulls were thickening, armor plates forming on their surfaces. But it wasn't enough. Every adaptation that made them more resistant to impacts also made them heavier, slower, easier to hit. "They're adding mass to their armor," Eric observed from the captain's chair. "But look, their maneuverability is dropping. They're becoming sitting ducks." "Exactly the problem," Jake said. "They can't win. Either they stay light and agile but vulnerable to impacts, or they add armor and become too slow to avoid getting hit. Basic physics doesn't care how smart you are." A group of Devourers tried a new tactic, linking together into a larger structure, apparently hoping that combined mass would let them push through the bombardment. The coalition ships responded by targeting them with larger projectiles. An entire asteroid, hastily carved into a rough sphere, slammed into the linked formation and scattered it like bowling pins. But the battle wasn't one-sided. The Devourers were learning, finding patterns in the fire. Some began to spiral, presenting constantly changing angles to incoming projectiles. Others released clouds of smaller fragments, hoping to intercept incoming rocks before they hit. It worked partially. The effectiveness of the bombardment dropped from devastating to merely heavy. "Sir, they're adapting their tactics," Amy called out. "Effectiveness down to 70% and dropping. All ships, randomize your fire patterns," Jake ordered over the fleet channel. "Don't let them predict where the next shot is coming from." The coalition ships responded, and the bombardment became truly chaotic. No pattern, no rhythm, just constant streams of matter from random directions at random intervals. The Devourers couldn't adapt to chaos. Their attempts at interception failed more often than they succeeded. Hours passed. The battle became a grinding attrition, the Devourers pushing forward through the gauntlet, losing thousands of units with every kilometer gained, but still advancing. Jake's initial excitement faded into grim determination. They were winning, technically, destroying far more Devourers than they lost in ships, but the enemy still had the numbers. "Commander, we have a problem," Amy said, her voice tight with stress. "Ammunition levels across the fleet are dropping faster than projected. At current rate of fire, we'll be dry in 90 minutes, and the Devourers will still have enough units to threaten Theros." Jake felt his stomach drop. They had gathered millions of tons of rock and metal, and they were running out. "Can we resupply?" "Not fast enough," Amy replied. "The mining ships are still gathering material, but they're hours away." Eric leaned forward, studying his tactical display. "What about the destroyed Devourers? We're creating a debris field as we fight. That's mass we can use," Jake blinked. It was such a simple idea that he almost laughed. "Amy, can we reconfigure the mass drivers to grab debris and throw it back at them?" "The magnetic systems could work as both launchers and retrievers," Amy said, already running calculations. "It would reduce our rate of fire while we collect debris, but yes, it's possible. We'd essentially be killing them with their own bodies." "Do it," Jake ordered. "Send the instructions to all ships. We're switching to recycling mode." Within minutes, the coalition ships began to change their tactics. Mass drivers would fire, then reverse polarity to pull in nearby Devourer fragments, then fire again. The rate of fire dropped, but the ammunition problem was solved. The Devourers found themselves in a nightmare scenario. Every unit destroyed became ammunition to destroy more units. A communication came through from Admiral Grant. Her face appeared on the screen, and she looked exhausted but grimly satisfied. "Morrison, your debris recycling idea is working, but we have a new situation. Long-range sensors show a second Devourer fleet approaching from a different vector. Smaller than the first, maybe 200,000 units, but if they hit us while we're engaged with the main force, we're in trouble." Jake felt his brief moment of hope evaporate. "Time until they arrive?" 30 minutes, maybe 40, Grant said. "Can we spare ships to intercept?" "Not without weakening the gauntlet. The main Devourer force would break through." Grant paused. "I'm open to suggestions, Commander," Jake thought frantically. They couldn't split their forces. Couldn't let either Devourer fleet through, but they also couldn't fight in two directions at once. Unless they could somehow use one enemy force against the other. "Admiral, what if we don't intercept the second fleet? What if we let them come to us?" "Explain," Grant said. "We're creating a massive debris field from the destroyed Devourers. If we adjust our formation, we can funnel both enemy fleets into the same kill zone. They'll have to fly through not just our fire, but through the wreckage of their own forces. The debris will be moving at high velocities, essentially creating a minefield." Amy was already modeling it on her display. "It could work, sir, but it's risky. If we miscalculate the debris trajectories, we could hit our own ships." "Right now, risky is better than impossible," Jake said. He turned back to Grant. "Admiral, I recommend we collapse the gauntlet formation into a more concentrated sphere. Let both Devourer fleets converge on our position. The debris field will work for us, and we can maintain fire density with fewer ships." Grant was quiet for a moment, considering. Then she nodded. "Approved. All ships, new formation incoming. We're going to let them surround us, then bury them in their own wreckage." Grant out. The coalition fleet began to reposition, pulling back from the extended gauntlet into a tighter defensive formation. The Devourers sensed the change and surged forward, probably thinking the defenders were retreating. They flew directly into the debris field, into clouds of their own destroyed fragments moving at lethal velocities. The effect was immediate and catastrophic for the Devourers. Their forward momentum carried them into collisions with debris that shredded their adaptive armor. They tried to slow down, but the second fleet was coming in from behind, pushing them forward. The two Devourer forces effectively trapped each other in a killing field of their own wreckage. Jake watched as the trap closed. The coalition ships maintained steady fire, adding new debris to the field with every shot, while the Devourers tore themselves apart trying to navigate through it. It was brutal, efficient, and utterly unlike any space battle in recorded history. "This is insane," Eric said, but he was grinning. "We're not fighting them, we're making them fight themselves." "Sir, enemy numbers are dropping fast," Amy reported. "Estimated 70% casualties on the main fleet, 80% on the secondary fleet. They're starting to break formation." And they were. The Devourer formations, so tight and coordinated before, were falling apart. Individual units were fleeing in random directions, abandoning their unified purpose. Some tried to retreat back the way they came. Others attempted to scatter to the sides, but the debris field had spread too far. There was no safe direction to run. "All ships maintain fire," Jake ordered. "Don't let up until they're gone or running." The battle continued, but the outcome was no longer in doubt. The Devourers had adapted to energy weapons, to exotic physics, to quantum manipulation. But they couldn't adapt to being buried in an avalanche of their own wreckage. They couldn't evolve past the basic principle that matter in motion stays in motion, and when that matter was everywhere, moving in every direction, there was nowhere to hide. Finally, after 6 more hours of grinding combat, Amy made the announcement Jake had been waiting for. "Sir, enemy retreat confirmed. Remaining Devourer units are fleeing the system at maximum speed. Theros is safe." A cheer went up across the Pathfinder's bridge, and Jake could hear similar celebrations over the fleet channel. They had done it. They had stopped the Devourers, an enemy that had terrified the galaxy for centuries, with nothing but rocks and basic physics. Admiral Grant's face appeared on screen again, and this time she was smiling. "All ships, cease fire. Let them run. Damage reports coming in. We lost 43 vessels, took moderate damage on another 100. But Theros is secure and the Devourers are in full retreat. Well done, everyone. Especially you, Commander Morrison." The victory celebration on Vixara Prime lasted 3 days, but Jake barely noticed it. He spent most of that time in debriefing sessions, explaining over and over how kinetic weapons had succeeded where advanced technology failed. The Coalition Council wanted every detail documented, analyzed, and integrated into their military doctrine. For a species that had considered themselves the pinnacle of advancement, accepting that rocks were better than quantum weapons was a hard lesson to swallow. On the 4th day, Jake stood in the Great Hall of the Coalition, a massive chamber where the most important ceremonies took place. The walls were made of some material that shifted colors based on the emotional state of the occupants, and right now they glowed a warm gold that the translator said meant pride and gratitude. Representatives from hundreds of species filled the chamber, and all of them were watching him. Jathira, the Valorian council leader, stood at the podium, her crystalline body catching the light and scattering it in rainbow patterns. "Commander Jake Morrison of Earth, please step forward." Jake walked to the center of the hall, trying not to think about the fact that billions of beings across the galaxy were watching this broadcast. Amy and Eric stood in the audience, both in their dress uniforms, looking almost as uncomfortable as he felt. "The Coalition Council has deliberated on your actions and their consequences," Jathira said, her chiming voice filling the hall. "Your discovery has fundamentally altered our understanding of warfare and adaptation. You have reminded us that progress is not always found in greater complexity, but sometimes in remembering what we have forgotten." She gestured, and a floating platform drifted forward, carrying an object that looked like a star captured in crystal. "The Star of Valor, our highest military honor, is awarded to those who change the course of history. Commander Morrison, for your courage, insight, and willingness to challenge conventional wisdom, we present you with this recognition." Jake accepted the award, feeling its weight in his hands. It was beautiful, almost hypnotic the way light moved through it, but what it represented felt heavier than the physical object. "Council members, honored guests, I accept this on behalf of all humans, and especially on behalf of Lieutenant Amy Foster and Captain Eric Stone, whose contributions were essential to our success. They too shall be recognized," Jathira assured him. but the council requests that you share your thoughts with the assembled representatives. What wisdom do you wish to impart from your experience? Jake hadn't prepared a speech. He had hoped to just accept the award and leave quietly, but apparently that wasn't going to happen. He looked out at the assembled aliens, so many different forms of life, all united in their advancement and sophistication. What could a human, from a species barely 2 centuries into space travel, tell them? Then he thought about Earth, about the long history of humans solving problems with whatever they had available, and he knew what to say. When I was a kid on Earth, maybe 8 years old, there was a bully in my school who was bigger and stronger than everyone else. He had the best equipment, the newest gadgets, everything. Nobody could beat him at anything because he always had an advantage in technology and resources. Jake paused, making sure the translators were keeping up. One day we were playing a game and I didn't have the right equipment, so I picked up a rock from the ground and used that instead. The bully was so focused on his sophisticated gear that he never saw the simple solution coming. I won that day not because I was better, but because I remembered that sometimes the simplest tool is the most effective. He held up the Star of Valor. The Devourers are like that bully. They adapted to sophistication, to complexity, to everything advanced. But they forgot about the basics, about the simple laws of physics that can't be outthought or out-evolved. Humanity didn't save Theros because we're smarter than you or more advanced. We saved it because we're still close enough to our primitive roots to remember that a rock is a weapon, and physics doesn't care about adaptation. Jathira's color shifted to a deep blue that the translator said meant contemplation. You suggest that progress can make us forget fundamental truths? I'm suggesting that progress and simplicity aren't enemies, Jake said. You can have advanced technology and still remember the basics. The Coalition has been fighting the Devourers for centuries, always trying to out-advance them. Maybe the lesson here isn't to abandon your technology, but to remember that sometimes the old ways work because they're built on truths that don't change. A murmur ran through the assembled representatives, a sound like wind through a forest made of thousands of different kinds of trees. Jake wondered if he had offended them, but then Jathira began to chime, a sound that he had learned meant approval. Wise words from a young species, she said. The Council has already begun implementing changes based on your success. Every Coalition warship will now carry kinetic weapons alongside their advanced armaments. We are establishing research divisions to explore other fundamental principles we may have overlooked in our pursuit of complexity. There's something else, Jake said, deciding to push his luck. The Devourers retreated, but they're not gone. They're out there at the Galactic Rim, adapting to what we did, learning from their defeat. Next time they come, if there is a next time, kinetic weapons alone might not be enough. What do you suggest? Asked a council member who looked like a floating cloud of gas with sparking lights inside it. Keep evolving your tactics, but keep the basics too. Always have a simple option, something that can't be adapted to because it's too fundamental. And maybe most importantly, don't assume that because something is old or primitive, it's useless. Every species in this galaxy probably has ancient weapons or tactics that could be valuable. Amy stepped forward from the audience, apparently deciding that protocol was less important than making a point. Sirs, Commander Morrison is right. I've been reviewing military records from Coalition member species. Many of them had kinetic weapons in their early histories, techniques and strategies that were abandoned when they advanced. If we compile that knowledge, we could create a database of fundamental warfare principles that work regardless of the enemy's adaptation capabilities. Jathira considered this. You propose we look backward to move forward? I propose we remember our foundations while we reach for the stars, Amy said. The council went into deliberation, their various forms of communication creating a symphony of sounds, lights, and energy patterns. Finally, Jathira spoke again. The council agrees. Lieutenant Foster, you are hereby appointed as the head of the new Fundamental Warfare Division. Your task will be to compile, study, and integrate basic combat principles from all Coalition species. Commander Morrison, you will serve as her military advisor. Jake and Amy exchanged glances. They had come to the stars representing humanity, and now they were being asked to teach the galaxy how to fight like primitives. The irony wasn't lost on either of them. We accept, Jake said. The ceremony concluded with more speeches and presentations, but Jake's mind was already moving ahead. The Devourers were out there learning from their defeat. The galaxy had bought time, but time was all it was. Eventually the enemy would return, and when they did, The Coalition needed to be ready with both the advanced and the fundamental, the sophisticated and the simple. 3 months later, Jake stood in a training facility on Vexara Prime, watching as Coalition officers from a dozen species practiced with mass drivers. They were learning to calculate trajectories, to understand momentum and kinetic energy, to think in terms of simple physics rather than exotic quantum effects. Some of them hated it, feeling like they were regressing. Others embraced it, finding a kind of purity in the simplicity. Eric approached, carrying a data pad. "You're going to love this. The weapons manufacturers are furious. Turns out it's hard to make a profit on rocks and metal chunks. They want the Council to mandate minimum complexity requirements for all military equipment." Jake laughed. How did the Council respond? Told them that effectiveness matters more than profit margins. Also, they've started stockpiling asteroids near every major world. Ammunition depots full of rocks. The galaxy's most advanced civilization is now hoarding space debris like it's precious metal. "It kind of is," Jake said. "Precious, I mean. If it keeps the Devourers away." Amy joined them, looking pleased. "I just got the compilation results. 47 Coalition species had some form of kinetic weaponry in their early histories. Another 33 had siege tactics using simple projectiles. We're integrating all of it into the database. By next year, every Coalition officer will train in both advanced and fundamental warfare." "Think it'll be enough?" Eric asked. "When the Devourers come back?" "Honestly, I don't know," Jake admitted. "But we'll be ready. We'll have quantum disruptors and railguns, antimatter bombs and catapults, reality warpers and rocks. We'll fight them with everything from the cutting edge of science to the dawn of warfare." A young cadet approached, a being that looked like a small dragon with scales that reflected starlight. "Excuse me, Commander Morrison? I have a question about kinetic energy calculations." Jake smiled. "Sure, what's the question?" "How do you determine the optimal mass-to-velocity ratio for maximum impact against adaptive armor?"